Hi, I'm Andrew Armstrong. Welcome to the back office teardown lab. And I've broken this tablet, the one that I tried to fix and did fix, and then I tried to mod and I broke it by modding it, by assuming the designers of this tablet would make the same design decisions I would have made, and they didn't, and it blew its own arsehole out. I think that's the way to express what it did. And show you, I think this is what blowing its own arsehole out looks like. It's just this little wee thing has a little blowny uppy look, and that's it. Let's let the smoke out. Anyway, I've tried to play with it and I can't be bothered. So what I am going to do is probably just show you how to use one of these, and this is a hot air blower. You've got bench supply ones. This is a kind of a modification really, because these were made for joining sort of those weird nylon-y type flooring materials using a sort of hot stick glue, and they would heat them. But what they've done in China, or wherever they've designed this, it's quite clever. They've put a power switch on its block, and what they've done, they've added controls here so you can adjust the flow rate, the speed of the fan and the temperature from here. And then on the back, this actually turns the heater on or off. So they've turned it into a really nice cheap surface mount tool that takes up a lot less room than the whole bench power supply one. Bench heater, fan air blower, whatever you want to call it, unit. So I'm just going to demonstrate that because one, it's really easy to bring onto my sort of teardown lab area with the camera, and I don't have to go over to the sort of benchy place. And I wanted to just show you maybe how you'd remove a memory chip. How about that? Something practical for a change. I'd like to show you how to remove this chip. We could try moving it from here to here actually. Just give a go. So what I'm going to start with, I've got some, I don't really want to waste this stuff, but I will do it. This is the solder paste, solder flux, and you always need a bit of solder flux here. We're going to assume this board is really never going to live again, because if we were going to do it properly, we would remove this ribbon cable and all these things. Maybe this sort of Wi-Fi module might be a bit of fun to investigate. I don't know, life's too short. And I'm just going to put some of this gel flux. You can see it there. See, it's quite a big, thick gel. It's expensive, this stuff. Don't waste it. But it's good. It sort of hangs around. It's obviously just a thick version of flux. When I turn this unit on, it's probably going to be a bit noisy, so I'm going to try to speak over it. If not, strain your ears and see if you can hear what I'm saying. So I'm going to keep the fan quite low, quite slow, so it's not too noisy, and I'm just going to turn up the temperature to as hot as it's going to go. Eventually, there we go, it's got there, 480. There's a glow of heat coming, and really, if you're just going to take off something like a memory chip like this, you just keep dance around. And because the solder is actually lead-free, you're not going to get too many visual clues when it's ready, because these sort of visual cues you used to get from leaded solder, it just look like molten. It would look melty, but what you'll notice when you're doing this, pay close attention to sort of other things around, like you see these small chips and things, because you'll see, especially if you've got the air flowing too high, they'll blow, they'll sort of float slightly left or right. And that tells you it's ready. I'm just going to hold this now in my other hand, because I want to get my right hand ready with these sort of tweezers. So you've got to be able to use both hands really. So just bubbling it away, working it, really just work it across those pins if you want. You're going to be using a lot more flow than I am. This is going to take quite a long time at such a slow flow rate. In fact, you might find it may not work. The whole idea is now, you've got to get that whole chip nice and warm so that it basically holds the heat. It's going to store that, it's going to stay hot enough to loosen its solder pads, on these pins. Because you don't want the sort of localized heat. When you use a sort of soldering iron, that's localized heat. You're just heating the metal of a bit of wire and that'll melt right away. That's great, but it doesn't really work for these, because you're trying to remove them all at the same time. So I'm just probably going to turn up the flow rate a little bit. There we go. Working it specifically on the pins now. I think the whole chip was going to be pretty warm. So now I'm just going to focus on those pins. You see the flux is still hanging around, so it's not completely melted away, so it's probably still got a bit longer to go in terms of the heat. It's quite funny, you know, it'll just all of a sudden loosen. You'll be here for ages and then all of a sudden it'll loosen. So this is a memory chip, similar sort of chip you'll find in your sort of pen drive USB. So there we go, we've lifted the chip. It took a little bit more force than I expected. Right, so lifting the chip, it took actually a little bit more force than I expected, and that's because I noticed something, because this metalwork has actually got really hot. This PCB is actually heat sunk to this chassis behind the screen, so that was just absorbing heat like nobody's business. So I really had to work at it, and until I actually managed to sort of mechanically lift the edge of the chip slightly, it didn't really want to go. Anyway, that's fine. Now, if you want to sort of glue the chip back down, so let's just say this is your new memory chip in your hand. So we've got two options here. Either we're going to try to position it into the same sort of place, or the camera doesn't really like looking at this. Here we go. Or we're going to just plop it back in the same place. So I think we'll put it back in the same place because of that sticker. I don't really fancy cleaning the board. You can see underneath there's actually a BGA footprint for a small memory chip. So that would be a sort of a chip that would look not like that necessarily. My memory chip's fallen off, might have bent the pins. It would look like one of these. You see where you can't see the pins because they're all in little pads underneath, so that would have actually just perched itself on top of there. Let's inspect this chip now. It might not be able to go back because I just dropped it off onto my carpet of doom. It looks, ow, it's still very hot. It looks to me like all of the pins are intact. And I'll just show you how I would suggest fitting this, and it's probably one way that you might be a bit reluctant to try. I'm just looking for pin 0. This would go back this other way. And actually, if this unit, it's a shame the unit doesn't work, because we could test this once we refitted it, see if it still managed to retain its memories of Android. We're going to just loosely pop that there for now. I'm going to see if I can get the camera in that a little bit clearer. Probably not. That's probably as good as you're going to get, guys. Maybe a bit more light. How about that? And just going to lift the it's getting a little bit fiddly now. I'm going to lift that, put it aside. So you see these pins now, they're kind of a bit, they're okay, they're just a little bit doity. So what I'm going to do is just grab some of this solder braid, you'll see it right there, and just tell you the technique. So the trick is really just get some flux, put it on those pins. You'll see it melt down. I've got my soldering iron, it's just dirty and crusty, so I'm just going to try to clean that off camera. I've got this pot of flux. I'm just going to rub onto the edge of that, and then I've got that big old ball of cotton candy, whatever you want to call it, that's just like a dishwasher Brillo pad, and you'll see it does a pretty good job with that soldering iron. The soldering iron itself is actually set to really quite high. It's too high really, but I don't know what temperature to use at the moment, so I'm just going to see what I'm doing there. I've got the flux was on the PCB, and I've got the solder braid. I'm just rubbing it gently. If you're going to rub it, really it's good to just rub it up and down, you know, in line with these pads. I'm just sort of rubbing it against the grain a little bit. That does give the danger though of lifting the pads, because sometimes you've got those pads that aren't connected to anything, the floating pads, and if you lose those it can make life a little bit tricky. But don't be afraid. I think that's the key here. You don't want to be afraid. I've got the soldering iron gone a bit too hot, and that's got the danger of oxidizing. So I'm going to try to work quickly because I don't really want to cool it down too much. So we've just put some flux back on there. We've got our chip. We're just going to whip it off, put it on top. And the reason we did that is because we cleaned the PCB because we didn't want the chip to sort of sit proud. Now we just got to align that. And I'm just aligning it by hand. I'm eyeballing it here. And I'm sitting really far back. You'll be sitting over this, but I'm sitting quite far back here. And you can see hopefully better on the camera than I can, but that on the surface of it looks pretty aligned. I think I could just bring it in just a touch. Let me just try. Whoa, yeah, I think that's good enough. In fact, it's almost deceiving a little bit on camera. On camera, there's like a parallax effect going on, but in reality, that is where it wants to be. And I'm just going to push it down, just hold my finger on it there. That's actually where it wants to be. So I've got my soldering iron. I'm just going to get a bit of solder here, regular solder. I'm just going to put it on one of the pins there, and I'm going to put it on the opposite pin here somewhere. And you'll see that's a miss. You'll go, that's a miss, mate. That's a horrible mess. Because you'll all of a sudden become Australian, and that is a mess, and I agree, but you don't want to leave that on there. So what you do is you just get a ball of solder on the end of your soldering iron, and you see I'm just sort of running it along. Do you see that? See that? It's just running along. Very gentle. Make sure your soldering iron tip's nice and clean, because you definitely do not want it to snag one of those pins. And what you probably can't see is that it's actually just leaving a tiny bit of solder on the pins as it goes along. And that's basically soldering them down. That's what you want. But you'll see now I've kind of over-egged it a little bit, and I've really just put way too much solder. So I've shorted out about 1 billion pins as I've been going along. And if that happens to you, and it will, because it just does every now and then, one, perfect your technique to use less solder. That's my main advice. And two, just you got a bit of braid, rub the braid along, just go in there, and you're done. It's not really a big issue. Get the braid, take off the excess solder, run it along, and you're done. See these ones at the end? See there's a bit of extra still there on that? Not a problem. Get your braid, dash it on there, run it along. If you use actually the pre-flux braid, that's actually even better. Look at that. Still one little bit there though. I'm not really doing a great job of that one. Let's just put a little bit more paste on there. Again, pre-flux braid. Don't go for the cheap stuff like I have here. Because look, if it's actually pre-flux, you can just hold it like that really and just roll the soldering on and it'll come off and lift it. But it's this so tenacious, this piece. Come on, please. Please come off. I want to go do something else. Cam off, cam off, cam off, cam off. There we go. It got there in the end. It got there in the end. So that's good. That looks real good. I'm inspecting it with my eyeballs. Now, another way of doing this, if you've got the kit, if you've got the hot air blower, what I would suggest, and I'm going to show you in another video this, is actually to just get some solder paste. And solder paste is basically flux like this, and it's got tiny little balls of solder in it. And what you can do is really, you can actually just put 2 little beads of solder paste. Imagine just running like a line of silicone to seal something. Then you stick the chip on top and it sits on that, and then just hit it with your hot air blower and it'll just blip, 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 and just stick that down. So there you go. That's a chip that is stuck down and hopefully reasonably well connected. I mean, it's as connected as it's going to be for something that I've just done just to demonstrate. See here, that's what you want to avoid though. See, I've got a couple of pins that are bent. Yeah, don't do that. The reason is I use this soldering iron for everything and it's got a bit scaggy on the end. Here's a tip though, before you start that, just get a bit of sandpaper or something and just sand the end down, maybe just like that, run it through so it's just nice and smooth, so when you do that it doesn't catch anything. It'll just zip across, and you're done. Please feel free to comment down below, click subscribe, and as ever, thanks for watching.